out to everybody to watch. And if folks pop in, great. If not, that's okay too. So Al, as I was just kind of talking about, we received a total of 64 apps. And I think I mentioned this last week too. I went through all of them and kind of just tiered them. So I have tier 1, tier 2, and then tier 3 and 4. And then beyond tier 4 is just stuff that like really isn't going to come to the top of the list. It's maybe like those revenue loss kind of things where people want money to support their project, their local business, which is great, but we're kind of looking more on that tier 1 and tier 2 right now with the limited 11 million that we have. So I broke them up into categories, and tier 1 and tier 2, I looked at basically the priorities that the county commissioners had set up. So projects that were going to have the most immediate impact, were shovel ready, so that they're either existing projects or with the ARPA funds, they can start right away and have the capacity, everything's in place, they're ready to roll. They just need this money to kind of start the program back up or, start this offshoot of what's already existing. And then, that they're highly important, they're shovel ready, housing and homelessness units, and capacity gain for both housing and assistance towards mental health and substance use disorder. So I split them up into the 2 categories. So we have public services on top here, which is what we're viewing right now. And then just below that, I did a different list of general infrastructure applications. So within just tier 1 and tier 2, we have a total of 13 public service applications, which are outlined right here. And I apologize if the screen is really small. It's just, I have a lot on there and a lot of information to kind of, that I was looking at. And so this is kind of, I'll actually go back up top. So when I was looking at, well, how do I, figure out if they're shovel ready and what the capacity gain is kind of going through them. I had the name of the application, the amount that they requested, and listed the project will begin and end date for capacity gain. So what were we really obtaining by funding this program? The population to be served, and if it was shovel ready, meaning is it new, existing, or an expansion of a project. So typically we would consider projects shovel ready that are already in place and existing, or an expansion. So it's existing, but it's expanding upon that project. So there might be a little bit of a startup curve, but stuff's in place, it's ready to roll. Versus new. New tends to be a lag time and not something that usually is ready to fund right out the gate. So, and then I'm just looking at the ones that are specific to housing and homeless services, mental health, and substance use. And so I use that for both the public services listed up here, as well as the general infrastructure. And so in the general infrastructure category, you're going to see projects that involve housing. Just all of them involve housing, whether it be capacity gain of building affordable housing at the end of the day, or possibly expanding spaces to increase beds for substance use and care services or mental health services. Okay. So for public services, though, I did want to get some feedback from the committee in terms of whether or not we want to just review all of them, because it's only 25 applications, or do we want to split this up and do kind of more of a collaborative team approach where 2 members of the team take 4 applications, and maybe it's in areas of expertise that you kind of know about and feel like you could really review that application and be able to point us in the right direction if this should be funded or not. So for example, Al, you're really good at development. So you kind of understand that infrastructure and could look at an application and say, well, is this really ready to go? Well, yeah, okay, they have this in place. You could kind of gauge that. And Whereas Liz could kind of look at maybe some of the applications that are related to mental health and substance use, and to tell us, yeah, this is a good approach. I think this is a good program, and I do feel like it's ready to go, and we should fund it. And here's how it scored, right? And then, we would kind of divvy it out that way, and maybe pair somebody with another member of the team. Or I could assign all of the applications to everybody, and we could review all of them. Or maybe we do one public service application, one infrastructure application, and kind of go that way too. What do you guys think?
How many are there in each category, Sandy?
Oh, sorry.
Of tier 1 and 2 that fall within the 2 categories of social services and then housing.
Yeah, so the focus would be just, you're right, on that tier 1 and tier 2 list here, and that total amount is 25. So we have 13 public service applications in the tier 1 and tier 2, and then 12 infrastructure applications in tier 1 and tier 2.
Got it.
We'd be looking at. The public service applications actually only sum to about $4 million, whereas the infrastructure were a bit over. It's 16 million there. So there, we couldn't fund everything, that's for sure. And I think that, potentially after reviewing some of the applications and scoring them, I think there were 1 or 2 that, given kind of the scoring around funding, and there's some that were just asking full funding from ARPA and not having a lot of community support. Those would probably rank lower and likely wouldn't get funded anyway, or if at all. So I don't think we're not trying to fund all of them, just picking out of those 12, who's the top 3 or 4.
And are there 8 of us who are doing scoring? Because I just wonder about, 12 and 13 is a more reasonable number for people to read through. So if we split them into the 2, had one group that was doing the public service and one group doing the infrastructure, so then you get 3 or 4 readers of every application, as opposed to only 2 readers. If you split it up smaller, might be a nice way to do it. And then you can, in the scoring, we can then see what shakes out with funding from the scoring, and we could come back as a group to do some work. Obviously, people might have other thoughts. I'm just throwing that one out there.
Yep. I think it would be 7 of you that would be scoring it, and Travis and I would be kind of exempt from actually scoring them. So there would be 7. And do you think, what do you guys think about, so should we do a group just does public services and one group does infrastructure, or should we do split it up where, we have the public service, a mix of public service and infrastructure, and we just kind of, each group gets, X number of public service applications and X number of infrastructure, and Liz and Pedro work on this set of applications that they review. And then Al and Courtney work on this other set, and we kind of, what do you think of that?
I think mixing it would be better, just so that it's more
I agree.
spread out.
Yeah, I think if we randomly assign them, because I think that way you might, there's always a little bit of bias, depending on people's understanding and background, and so that might help kind of smooth that over and reduce bias.
I was actually going to go the other direction towards scoring things we understand a little better. There's a part of it that I think is hard to score when you're less familiar, that part of, when I've done scoring of stuff before, you have some level of not expertise, but you bring a level of understanding. So, I will defer to the group if the group wants the mix. I was sort of thinking if there's people who understand housing better, them reading housing ones and seeing them all together, as one group, you sort of then see, you can score them in a way in which you understand the whole. of what's being. I mean, I know the goal isn't to compare them necessarily, but when you score them, it becomes you can see what you're looking for in terms of the scoring. If you see all the housing ones and like all the public service ones. Just a different opinion. I will go the other way too. I can read housing ones, of course, too. But
you guys are gonna hate me for saying this, especially since I'm not soaring. But I think that probably the best way to do it is that everybody reads every
Reads them all.
application. And the
Yeah.
reason is you want Alan Courtney's expertise, but you also want Liz and Catherine's gut feeling. And when you get together to discuss your scores, you're going to reveal those things to each other and gain a little more depth about what the best applications are. And same vice versa. There may be an application in the public service realm that Courtney is blown away by, but that Liz and Pedro can say, here's what you should know about that application or that entity. There may be some that score well, that you need that fifth person to say, but I just really loved this one. Just having served on a bunch of these over the years, there's value in expertise on an application and somebody without expertise but a strong gut feeling. So you're going to get the best result if everybody reads all of them, but I understand that it's a pretty big ask to me.
How long are they, Sandy? Like each one, do you think it will take us to read them? Like each application?
They're not that long. You could certainly get what you're looking for from a reviewer standpoint just by reading, the project description and the scope, and then skimming down to the financial if you wanted to kind of look at it from that perspective.
But for scoring, like if we're going to score each one, you have to read each one.
Yep.
Like to score, would it take an hour, or do you think, or half an hour for each one? Do you have a sense?
I would say to read it and score it would probably be a half an hour.
Okay.
It took me like 3 days to go through all 64 and create the spreadsheet. And of course, I was doing other things in between. So, and we
So
kind
12
of,
hours, essentially like 12 hours to do 25 of them.
Yep. It's going to take some time.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, Travis, and I think it makes sense. There's a fresh eyes thing that's great, and then an expertise thing that's great too.
So just a point of clarification. So when we score them, we all score them and we share our scores. How do we then, what happens next? Like, how do we determine who gets what?
So it's a really good question. So once everyone's scored, we'll have our top ranking applications, and then we'll meet again and we'll discuss how that'll lay out. So sometimes you can do funding in the sense of you just fund the top tier until you run out of money. So it's that simple. Or if you're saying, well, we funded all of these at full capacity, but I really liked that fourth one, even though it was just outside of the funding. Is there any way we can kind of go back and look at the funding mechanism and give that project a little bit of funding to support it? And we can do that. We have that flexibility to go back and say, well, we really should fund number 4. So that there's kind of 2 ways or 2 thoughts on how to do it. And we could certainly, as a committee, decide what you want to do at that time. But it's always a good thing just to review them first, get the top scorers, and then from there do it by a ranking system is usually the fairest way. And that comes in because, of course, we're all going to have different opinions on what we think and how we feel someone scored something by reading it, because we're not all, we're not robots, and we're not. So how I view an application is going to be a little bit different than you. And so there's that human element to it that we can then bring back to the table when we're doing the final scores and final numbers to adjust as we need to. And then from there, those recommendations will go on to the county commissioners for review and approval. And so if they said to us, hey, listen, we don't want to fund something, we'd get kicked back to us, we'd have to figure out what we would then reallocate that funding towards. Or they might say at that meeting, well, let's just fund this infrastructure instead and completely eliminate a project. That is a possibility. It's probably unlikely, but that's kind of, it is something to be aware of. We do kind of have to, we're only making recommendations to the commission. And then the thought process too, to kind of like talk more about that, is that once we've kind of figured out this tier 1 and tier 2 process, we'll then probably go back as a committee and review those 3 and 4 applications and say, is there anything with the round 2 funding that we are potentially going to get in? Well, we know we're going to get in May. I'm just not sure when exactly we'll get it, that we want to like fund, because there are some really good 3 and 4. They're just not they don't meet that initial criteria that 1 and 2 had. But a lot of really good programs that I think would be great in our community and really help out. Al, what do you think about scoring all of them?
I mean, I think Travis had some valid points relative to, different perspectives are beneficial. Someone may have a more expertise in that field, but that may influence how they look at it. Where somebody that is just reading it from a comparison perspective of the other applications may rank something higher. And that's fine. So I don't have an issue having to read more rather than less. I do know from reading your very small screen that I think there's a couple of infrastructure ones that I would need to at least alert that we have a role on the projects. It looked like there's a couple of Westbrook housing ones that were on the list. They may not be identified as Westbrook housing, but the Stacy Symbol Apartments.
Yep. And Stroudwater.
And Stroudwater. Our firm is doing the site work or the site design and permitting for Westbrook housing. And then Vertical Harvest, we did the traffic work for, but we didn't do the site development work. Do I think I could review those and be impartial? Yeah, but at least I would want to disclose that while I'm more than happy to rank them all, you guys might want to throw out the rankings on those or discount the rankings on those, because we do have a role to some extent on those. We're not really involved in the financing of them. But I would want to be sensitive to any appearance of a conflict. Yep.
No, I agree with that. I would have you abstain from scoring those ones. Absolutely. Are you doing anything with Avesta?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I would want to double check. While I think I know all the projects we're doing, we probably have 300 or 400 active projects, and somebody could be doing something on those that I just hasn't risen to the point where I would be aware of it yet.
Okay.
I mean, I would be interested in what you would, how you would score those, Al, but yeah, maybe we could exclude your scores from the final total, not have you abstain completely. Just, because it would be interesting, since you are familiar with the projects. I don't know if that does create a conflict, but it might be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. I don't know. What does the group think?
Yeah, I wouldn't take the scores, but
Okay.
I do want your input. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we're talking about those, if you want to, I think that's a great idea, Catherine, to maybe give us some notes and feedback on like, hey, here's what I think, or, after reading it, but I'm not, we don't want them to score it, because we of course don't want to look like
Yeah.
we're playing favorites or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
Yep. But I agree with you. We definitely would love to hear the input there. And I think, after the one thing I did kind of want to make a point to talk about is that there were some projects that may, sort of appear like they should be in tier 1. For example, I had a project, South Portland Housing Development Corp wants to build and expand on an existing parcel of land on Broadway in South Portland. And which is great, but they don't have like the site planning application approved. And so that to me just immediately kind of says, hey, that's not shovel ready. But even though it's housing, right? So like, I think if there's questions once we kind of put these out to the community as to what we're going to be reviewing, that would be the reason why, is if it really didn't meet that shovel ready capacity, or, for example, the city of South Portland put in a grant, but there are a lot of providers that applied individually for our program that were already within that South Portland grant. So it was sort of a duplicate of services, and that's why we kind of shuffled them out. And the county will work with the city of South Portland to really identify what that need is that's not being met. So that was a little unclear too, as to what service providers they really need to have. So we did remove them, but might come up in conversation for sure. And I think that's really it for folks that I kind of switched around. The other one we'll see in tier 1 and tier 2 that looks like it should more be a 3 or 4 is MANA. And that kind of goes back to that conversation about the city of South Portland. They're currently working with them in the shelter system and are huge, a very impactful group. So even though they're providing transportation, point-to-point transportation to family members, they have that community health benefit as well. There's other wraparound services that they offer that are just as impactful for that community, and kind of warrants them to be in that tier 1, tier 2 category.
That 55 cents really breaks the bank. Yeah,
Where is it? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. She's giving us good numbers. That's
good.
good numbers right there. She's actually done her homework is what that means. But any questions about that really small spreadsheet list? No. I'll put this in the advisory committee folder, share folder, and I'll put all of the applications within that folder too that I've downloaded from Neighborly software, so they can be accessible that way too. I realized too that I was supposed to send out an email link to Neighborly software for everyone for the reviewers to sign in, and I just completely spaced it. So I'll do that too and get everyone linked up, and I'll send up a follow-up email to all of the other members, just kind of letting them know the plan to review all of the applications and how to log in. And I'll assign everybody, but I think everyone needs to log in first. Right, Courtney? Guys, they need to be, registered first before I can email.
And then what is our deadline, Sandy? Do we have 2 weeks to read them now, or is we gonna review them the next time we meet?
Yeah, so I think we should probably talk about that. That's a great suggestion, because we have right now I have listed for the 28th of February, our first meeting at the county commissioners to provide them our recommendations. So we'll want to meet before that just to go over and review the process of where everyone's at, what the applications look like. So we have a scheduled meeting on the 15th. So we could have 2 weeks essentially to review them and meet on the 15th and make our final decision. Or maybe meet on the 15th and then the following week, the 22nd. Do an initial internal review on the 15th and then a final internal review on the 22nd for the recommendations to be provided to the commissioners on the 28th. You think that's enough time, or should we push that out? Because we could push it out too if we need to.
I think it's enough time.
Okay.
Yeah, if we get access, like, today, I think we can start reading them.
So everyone's scores will need to be done at least on the 15th, but definitely by the 22nd, so we can do our final scoring and review to then provide those recommendations on. Catherine, does that give us enough time Tuesday to meet that deadline for the Monday commissioners meeting on the 28th?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
totally. If it's, yeah.
All right. We'll do that, and I'll send out an email with a link to register. It's really simple. You guys all watched that meeting, and that meeting's actually in the advisory committee drive too. So if you wanted to look at that, if you're having trouble, you could pop that open, and that just goes over what Kiana explained about registering. So, all right, that sound good? So we'll
Sounds
all
good.
review score. Okay, perfect. All right, I think that's it, guys, for today. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Feel
Thanks,
free to
Andy.
email if you have any questions, always, or call.
Will you let us, Travis, will you let us know when we've all been assigned? Or will it give us an email that we've all been assigned?
It will automatically email you.
It will.
That says
Okay.
you've been assigned to these applications. So you
Perfect.
should get one. If you don't, then definitely ask me, because
Okay.
I'll
Awesome.
hopefully, I should probably, so in the email, I'll probably give a deadline to register in the portal. Just everyone, if you could, most of you are all set, but probably by Friday, I would think everyone should register, and then I can assign those applications, and I'll put the hard copies in the file so everyone can start immediately reviewing them if you want. So you don't need to have that link to review them, but they'll be in there.
Yeah, and I just want to add, it's registering is really easy. Using the software is really easy. I feel like it might have been over complicated a little bit, not over complicated, but the tutorial was, it seemed like it was a little bit longer than necessary. But yeah, it's a really easy software to use, and you can't break it. I've tried. So
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too, Sandy.